Order, order. We start with questions to the Secretary of State for Northern Ireland, Jeff Smith.
Good morning, Mr. Speaker. Question 1.
Secretary of State.
Good morning, Mr. Speaker. And with permission, Mr. Speaker, I'll answer questions 1 and 7 together. But before that, if I may, I'd like to start by welcoming the return of the devolved institutions to Northern Ireland following the publication of the Safeguarding the Union command paper last month and earlier this month, and the Windsor Framework, which was agreed exactly a year ago yesterday. I'd also like to take this opportunity to mention that the Northern Ireland Human Rights Commission and Equality Commission for Northern Ireland will celebrate their 25th anniversaries on Friday. The government is doing all it can to support the Independent Commission for Reconciliation and Information Recovery in delivering effectively for victims and families. Significant progress has been made since the ICR-IR was established in December last year, and I expect the Commission's doors to open on the 1st of May.
Jeff Smith.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. In the light of this morning's High Court ruling, does the Secretary of State still think that the citizens of Northern Ireland should be the only people in the UK to be denied the right, after the 1st of May, to seek justice for crimes committed in the Troubles through civil case and inquest?
I thank the honourable gentleman for his question. So, Mr. Justice Colton handed down his judgment at 10:15 this morning. It's a very complex case. I'm told the judgment runs to over 200 pages, and I am yet to see it. It will take some time to consider, but we will consider Mr. Justice Colton's findings very, very carefully. But we do remain committed to implementing the Legacy Act.
Karen Smith.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. It is deeply concerning that the government's own imposed 1st of May deadline means that inquests will be unable to conclude, likely to be. We've heard reports that there was only one specialist in the MOD dealing with these inquiries, and that possibly the MOD delays in providing material has caused additional hold-ups. So we really do need to understand, what is the government doing to ensure that the inquests are able to conclude by the government's own self-imposed deadline?
Secretary of State.
I thank the honourable lady for her question. I'd humbly like to remind her that actually the original deadline before the amendments that we tabled in the House of Lords before this bill became an act was for the 1st of May 2023, and this is an extra year. And the government continues to assist Northern Ireland courts in good faith in relation to legacy matters, and there is no question of the government deliberately seeking to frustrate inquests. The Act contains provisions allowing a coroner to request a review of a death by the Independent Commission, led by Sir Declan Morgan as Chief Commissioner, if the inquest has not been concluded via the coronial process by the 1st of May 2024.
Secretary of State Hilary Benn.
Thank you very much indeed, Mr. Speaker. The government's Legacy Act is opposed by victims groups, all of the political parties in Northern Ireland, the Northern Ireland Human Rights Commission and others. This morning, the Belfast High Court has found that the immunity provisions of the Act are not compliant with Articles 2 and 3 of the European Convention on Human Rights. Given that immunity has always been presented as the central foundation of the Legacy Act, what do ministers intend to do about this judgment, and how can the Commission become operational when one of its central powers has just been struck down?
Secretary of State.
I'd like to thank the honourable gentleman for his question. As I say, this is a very complex case. Over 200 pages, which were just being reported on less than 90 minutes ago. And so it will take some time to consider. But we do remain committed to implementing the Legacy Act, including delivering the ICR-IR.
Ben.
Recognising that the issues raised in today's judgment will take some time to be conclusively determined by the higher courts, assuming that the government appeals, does he agree that it would now be quite wrong to close the door on inquests and civil cases from the 1st of May, which will deny citizens in Northern Ireland the rights that citizens in the rest of the UK take for granted? Therefore, will he now extend that deadline, not least to ensure that those inquests that would otherwise be stopped on the 1st of May are able to continue so that a decision can be reached?
State.
I thank the honourable gentleman for his question again, and he's quite right. This is a complex case and is likely to head to further court cases, further action in higher courts. But I do want to consider this judgment carefully, and I want to look at all the 200 pages and take the legal advice that he would expect me to take in such circumstances. But we do remain committed to implementing the Legacy Act, including delivering the ICR.
James Daly.
Number 3, Mr. Speaker.
With permission, Mr. Speaker, I would like to answer questions 3, 5 and 13 together. The Government is fully committed to protecting and upholding Northern Ireland's place in the Union, a commitment we reaffirmed recently in the command paper Safeguarding the Union. This included new measures in domestic legislation to protect unfettered access to the UK internal market and affirm Northern Ireland's constitutional position as set out in the Belfast Good Friday Agreement. We believe this Government is convinced this is the best way we can safeguard Northern Ireland's place in the United Kingdom.
James Daly.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. What action has my right honourable friend taken to ensure that no new regulatory borders between Great Britain and Northern Ireland can emerge from future agreements with the European Union?
I thank my honourable friend for his question. We have actually ended the presumption of automatic alignment with EU law by making clear that the very narrow set of goods rules which apply in Northern Ireland are subject to the democratic oversight of Stormont, including the Stormont break. Once the break is triggered for a rule or where an entirely new rule is brought forward, it will be for the UK to determine at the Joint Committee whether that provision should apply in Northern Ireland. Here again, the Government has established the protections available through statutory provision. So we believe there are very strong reasons that we can say that we have ended the presumption of automatic alignment.
Simon Baines.
Mr. Speaker, may I congratulate my right honourable friend and Minister Baker on their very impressive achievement in restoring the Northern Ireland Executive? And would he agree that good cross-border transport links are vital to safeguarding all parts of our union, such as, in the case of my border constituency of Clwyd South, the electrification of the North Wales main line linked to the northwest of England, and improved road links, such as the proposed Panllanamynnet bypass between Wales and North Shropshire?
I have to congratulate my honourable friend on making some very excellent constituency points, as well as highlighting the very important need for good transport links across our union. This was actually recognised in the Safeguarding the Union command paper, where, and indeed more recently, earlier this week, when we talked about the reinvestment of money that would have been spent on HS2 in its northern sections for good connections across our country, including the A75, which is a vital connection connecting Scotland and Northern Ireland.
Dr. James Davies.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The union is strongest when people can see and feel the benefits to their daily lives. Does my right honourable friend agree that a prosperous Northern Ireland with stable, devolved government is the surest way to safeguard its integral place in the United Kingdom?
Secretary of State.
I'd like to thank my honourable friend for his question, and I absolutely 100% do agree with the sentiment there. And it is a real pleasure to see the devolved institution at Stormont up and running. You, Mr. Speaker, have a new colleague. The former Speaker had been desperate to retire for 2 years. Tributes were paid to Speaker Maskey at the time, but Speaker Poots is now in place, and it's been wonderful to see the new First Minister and Deputy First Minister working together to try and achieve good solutions in public services and a whole host of other things for the people of Northern Ireland. And the union is best served by devolved institutions working, and I welcome very much indeed everyone's commitment to that cause.
Hannah.
This morning's High Court ruling confirms what every fair observer knows, that the government's legacy legislation is not compatible with human rights. It puts the needs of perpetrators ahead of the needs of victims, and it is not supported by any party in Northern Ireland or across the island of Ireland. He cannot truly believe that it serves the rule of law or our shared future in any constitutional arrangement. When will this government repeal this completely unacceptable legislation?
Secretary of State.
I'm afraid she'll, and I thank you for her question, but she'll have to hear an answer that I've given previously, because this court judgment was only handed down earlier this morning. It is a very complex case. There's over 200 pages to consider. I don't even believe the government QC has gone through it yet in any great detail. We were not given any notice of what might have been contained in the ruling beforehand. And so, but we will, I do obviously pledge that we will consider Mr. Justice Colton's findings very carefully. But as I will continue to say, we remain committed to implementing the Legacy Act, including delivering the ICR-IR.
Dave Dougan.
The recent Safeguarding the Union command paper claimed to copper fasten Northern Ireland's political and constitutional place in the Union, yet the British-Irish agreement makes it clear that the agreed position is for the people of the island of Ireland alone by agreement between the two parts, respectively, and without external impediment to exercise their right of self-determination. How does the Minister square this clear contradiction in the UK Government's commitments to all the people of Northern Ireland?
I thank him for his question. I mean, firstly, getting the devolved institution in Strand 1 of the Belfast Good Friday Agreement is of vital importance, because it actually means that the Strand 2 institutions can work properly, which work for everybody across the community, all communities. It also allows the Strand 3 institutions to work in a better way by including representatives like the First Minister and the Deputy First Minister, things like the British Irish Council. So there's a whole host of things. And the Belfast Good Friday, but when it comes to constitutional status of Northern Ireland, that obviously requires the consent of a simple majority of its people, and all the provisions of the Belfast Good Friday agreement still stand.
Jim Shannon.
Sorry, is that me? Yes. Oh, sorry, Mr. Speaker, thank you very much. Mr. Speaker, one of the great things about and importance in this case is the education system and the trips that people bring to come here. So if I want to safeguard the Union, can I ask this question? What steps have been taken to ensure that students in Northern Ireland have equal access to education tours in Westminster, bearing in mind that the cost to fly over can be prohibitive, and would consideration be given to additional funding to allow some sort of subsidisation? If we can, the students from Northern Ireland can have the same access as those in England.
I thank the honourable member for his question, and I mean, Northern Ireland, by being separated by the Irish Sea, is obviously in a geographic location that makes it difficult to travel to other areas of the United Kingdom. And I understand his keenness to help Northern Ireland students benefit from learning across the Union. We did put in place a financial package for the incoming executive that helps achieve some of these objectives by providing £3.3 billion to support Northern Ireland's unique challenges. But if he has individual cases, I'm sure I'd be interested to hear about them and what we could possibly do in the future.
We now come to Geoffrey Donaldson.
Mr. Speaker, and further to the question from my honourable friend, member for Strangford, will the Secretary of State join me in welcoming the fact that the new UK East-West Council will have its first meeting next month in Belfast, and that one of the key objectives is actually to encourage greater educational cooperation across the United Kingdom, as well as binding Northern Ireland more closely into the wider economy and the UK internal market?
I'm very happy to join him in welcoming the new East-West Council and its situation. I mean, and obviously looking forward to seeing the North-South Ministerial Council functioning. The UK East-West Council will bring together a wealth of experience and knowledge from representatives from the United Kingdom Government, devolved administrations, business representatives, educational leaders, as he suggests, and representatives from the cultural sector. And we're committed to it getting to work in March and doing good things.
Geoffrey Donaldson.
The Secretary of State referenced earlier the financial package that the Treasury has put in place to support our public services in Northern Ireland. But there remains a significant gap in the next 2 financial years in relation to our commitments on public sector pay. Will the Secretary of State work with us to seek further support from the Treasury to ensure that the Executive lives within its budget, but that we are able to pay our public sector workers a decent wage for the vital work that they do?
And I thank my right honourable friend for his supplementary, and again, if I may, pay tribute to him for all the work he's done on making sure that the devolved institution of the executive and the Stormont can come back together. It is, an amazingly good, historic piece of work that he has achieved. And yes, it is good to see the executive back up and running and making these choices and opening negotiations with the unions to get the public sector back on track when it comes to pay and work in Northern Ireland. And I know there will be meetings, I believe a meeting today between the Finance Minister and the Chief Secretary of the Treasury, but I'll always happily work with him on all these agendas.
Boris Robertson.
Question number 4, Mr. Speaker.
Mr. Speaker, with permission, I'll answer questions 4, 6 and 15 together. The Government is committed to the economic growth of Northern Ireland, working closely with other UK departments, the newly formed Executive and NI businesses. Our plan includes boosting trade and investment, building on the success of the Northern Ireland Investment Summit last year, levelling up Northern Ireland's economy, including through our city and growth deals worth £617 million, and implementing the key deliverables of the Safeguarding the Union command paper. Only last night, Mr. Speaker, I attended Retail NI's supplier showcase, and I'm very grateful that I made it back first thing this morning.
Robertson.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Thank the Minister for that very full answer. Could I ask him, given that the rest of the United Kingdom, the internal market, is the biggest market for Northern Ireland, what role does he see for the new intertrade, particularly with respect to trade between Great Britain and Northern Ireland?
Well, Mr. Speaker is absolutely right about Northern Ireland's most important economic relationship being with Great Britain. The Government is working to establish Intertrade UK as set out in the command paper, fulfilling our pledge to grow the economy by ensuring that businesses, large and small, can maximise the full range of east-west trading opportunities. Implementing the Windsor Framework and the command paper are, of course, Government priorities, and I'm pleased that I'm responsible for them. We will, of course, update the House in greater detail at an early opportunity.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The Safeguarding the Union command paper states that there will be no checks when goods move within the UK internal market system, save for those conducted by UK authorities as part of a risk-based or intelligence-led approach. Regulation 13 of the Windsor Framework Retail Movement Scheme regulations requires officials to check the ID numbers on the seals of all retail consignments entering Northern Ireland and break open 5 to 10% for visual inspection. Is my right honourable friend now able to confirm when and if this regulation will be removed?
Well, I'm most grateful to my honourable friend for his insightful and well-researched Perhaps I shouldn't have got that early flight after all, Mr. Speaker. Well-researched question. As we set out in the command paper, as we transition to the UK internal market system, through our risk management approach, we will provide clear legal direction to DAERA and other UK government authorities to eliminate any physical checks when goods move within the UK internal market system, except those conducted by UK authorities and required as part of a risk-based or intelligence-led approach to tackle managing risk through criminality, abuse of the scheme, smuggling and disease risks. I recognise the importance of my honourable friend's question, and I can say that I will update the House on our plans in greater detail at the earliest reasonable opportunity, which I hope and intend will be before we break for the Easter recess.
Blackman. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And it's good news that the Executive is back up and running. Will my honourable friend ensure that the new Executive take a full advantage of all the devolved capability they have, in particular on taxation, to encourage the private sector to grow and thrive in Northern Ireland?
Well, I certainly will give them every support, Mr. Speaker, whilst also, of course, respecting the devolution settlement. But to just give him one example, the reason I was there last night with Retail NI was in order to promote a Department for Business and Trade's terrific offering in Northern Ireland, which includes a trade and investment hub, which covers the UK Export Academy, Export Support Service, and there are now 16 DBT export champions, including making available in-person support. If anyone wishes to know in greater detail, I recommend they go to the great.gov.uk website.
Speaker, will the Minister liaise with the relevant departments in Northern Ireland to maximise the benefits that, for example, the only enterprise zone in Northern Ireland in my constituency can be promoted and developed, along with the excellent broadband facilities that are the best in these islands, to promote our economy, to bring inward investment and create prosperity.
Mr. Speaker, he makes a great case for his constituency, and I certainly would like to see terrific levels of investment into it. But I'd like us to go further. I'd like us to see that investment zone right across the whole of Northern Ireland, and I hope and expect that together the UK Government and the restored Executive will make the most of that opportunity.
Patrick Grady.
Why does the UK Government think it's a good thing for the Northern Ireland, the EU single market, but not for other parts of the United Kingdom, particularly those parts of the United Kingdom that voted to remain in the EU and the single market?
Well, I'm most grateful to him for his question, of course, Mr. Speaker. But he'll know two things. That, of course, this word access is somewhat contested, and I'd encourage him to go and have a look at the trade figures for trade between the United Kingdom and the EU and just satisfy himself of the effect of our leaving the European Union. And the other thing I'd say to him, in all seriousness, I think all of us should reflect very carefully on the status of Northern Ireland and the particular circumstances, not only of geography but history. And it is because of the unique status of Northern Ireland that we've been able to agree unique arrangements. And I do not imagine the European Union would have agreed these unique arrangements for any other territory.
Shadow Minister Fleur Anderson.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. According to a Northern Ireland Affairs Committee report, Northern Ireland received proportionally less than Scotland, Wales and England in the first round of levelling up funding. In the latest round of funding in November, not a penny was allocated to Northern Ireland, and the government said that this was because the Executive wasn't sitting. So is there good news for the people of Northern Ireland today? Now that power sharing has been restored, will the Secretary of State update the House on discussions he's had about ensuring a fair share of the levelling up funding goes to Northern Ireland?
Mr. Speaker, of course the Honourable Lady raises a very important point, and I will be glad to continue conversations with the Executive. As she knows, we've made available a generous package of £3.3 billion overall. We continue conversations in the detail of those areas of funding which have been repurposed. Those conversations will continue, and when we can update the House in fuller detail, of course we'll be glad to do so.
Stephen Bonner.
Question number 8, please.
Minister.
Mr. Speaker, the Government is working to establish an East-West Business Council as set out in the command paper, fulfilling our pledge to establish a unique forum for key representatives across the United Kingdom, from government, business and the education sector, to identify opportunities for deepening connections between Northern Ireland and the rest of the UK in important areas such as trade, transport, education and culture. I shall be in regular contact with other ministers across government to ensure the timely delivery of this commitment.
Stephen Bonner.
I thank the Minister for his answer. The Economic Centre of Excellence has estimated that 80% of Northern Irish freight exports to England comes through Scotland, while a considerable proportion of NI trade with Britain is direct trade between the north of Ireland and Scotland. So given this, what concrete role does he see unproposed for the Scottish Government in any new East-West Council?
Well, Mr. Speaker, of course the Government of Scotland has its rights and is entitled to be part of these arrangements, and we shall be respectful in engaging with the Scottish Government to make sure that they play a full part, fully respecting the devolution settlement.
Sir Oliver Hill.
My right honourable friend agree with me that the Northern Ireland members of the UK-EU Parliamentary Partnership Assembly play a very important role, including the right honourable gentleman for Lagan Valley, in improving the understanding between the EU and the UK about the way in which the trade and cooperation agreement should work, and easing the way for a better relationship between the United Kingdom and the European Union.
Mr. Speaker, I do agree with my right honourable friend, and I pay tribute to the leading role that he plays in that forum, and I'm most grateful. I think a large number of colleagues, whatever their view on exiting the European Union, have put a great deal of effort into building up the bonds of friendship, which are so important as we go forward under the Trade and Cooperation Agreement. And I'm most grateful to him for highlighting the important work of that forum, and again I pay tribute to him for his leading role.
SNP spokesperson Richard Thompson.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The East-West Council as proposed is something that I'm personally very enthusiastic about, because it provides potentially a space to open up where Scotland and Northern Ireland can cooperate along with other parts of the UK and all that we have in common economically, socially and culturally, and that we'll continue to have in common irrespective as to whatever constitutional arrangements might be in place in future. So will the ministerial team at the Northern Ireland office agree to meet with me so that we can discuss how Scotland could play a positive role in that and to get that engagement with other parts right?
Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, yes, of course, we'd be delighted to meet with him to discuss those matters.
We now come to Prime Minister's questions. We are joined in the gallery today by Dr. Andreas Norlin, the Speaker of the Swedish Parliament, and his delegation. We now come to the first questions. Giles Watling.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Number one, if you please.
Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, I know the thoughts of the whole House will be with the friends and family of Lord Cormac and Ronnie Campbell. They were dedicated parliamentarians. Mr. Speaker, this morning I had meetings with ministerial colleagues and others. In addition to my duties in this House, I shall have further such meetings later today.
Giles Watling.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I thank my right honourable friend for his answer. Now, I'm certain that everyone in this chamber will agree, whatever their political standpoint, that we should be able to think, speak and vote without fear or favour. But today I need to ask about the painful subject of dental care in Clacton, which is in crisis. Our ICS has found the money and a private firm has found the students to massively increase dental appointments in my patch. However, paper pushers in the NHS England keep citing spurious reasons to prevent this groundbreaking initiative being deployed. Does my right honourable friend agree with me that this is scandalous and should be dealt with, and those people blocking it held to account?
Prime Minister.
Well, our dentistry recovery plan will make dental services faster, simpler and fairer for patients, including in Clacton, and will fund around 2.5 million more appointments. On the matter the honourable friend raises, as he'll know, this is a local matter, so the Integrated Care Board will determine if they wish to support the pilot proposal in Clacton. But I know that the Minister for Public Health has written to my honourable friend about the proposal, and I hope her letter addresses his concerns.
We come to the Leader of the Opposition, Keir Starmer.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Can I join with the Prime Minister in his remarks about Lord Cormac and Ronnie Campbell? Tory MP spent last week claiming that Britain is run by a shadowy cabal made up of activists, the deep state and, most chillingly of all, the Financial Times. At what point did his party give up on governing and become the political wing of the Flat Earth Society?
Well, Mr. Speaker, another week where the honourable member is just sniping from the sidelines because he has absolutely nothing that he can say what we do. What we're getting on with, Mr. Speaker, is delivering on the people's priorities. The number of small boats down by a third, Mr. Speaker. NHS performance, improving, inflation continuing to fall. And Mr. Speaker, not only that, we're delivering a significant tax cut for millions of working Britons, while his incoherent energy plans would put taxes up for everyone across the country.
Mr. Speaker, his predecessor spent last week in America trying to flog her new book. In search of fame and wealth, she's taken to slagging off they made her Prime Minister, now they can't bear talking about her. In search of fame and wealth, she's taken to slagging off and undermining Britain at every opportunity. She claimed that as Prime Minister she was sabotaged by the deep state. She also remained silent as Tommy Robinson, that right-wing thug, was described as a hero. Why is he allowing her to stand as a Tory MP at the next election?
Well, Mr. Speaker, I don't believe a single member of this House supports Tommy Robinson, Mr. Speaker. But Mr. Speaker, if he wants to talk about former leaders and predecessors, the whole country knows his record because he sat there while anti-Semitism ran rife in this party, and not once but twice backed a man who called Hamas friends, Mr. Speaker. But to their credit, the Shadow Chancellor, the Shadow Home Secretary and indeed the Shadow Foreign Secretary refused to back the former Labour leader. But he didn't, because he's spineless, hopeless and utterly shameless.
Mr. Speaker, I've changed my party for the better. He is being changed by his party. The reason he's letting her stand is because he's too weak to do anything about it. It's the story of his leadership. When they refuse to accept any blame for the ruin of the last 14 years, you do wonder who they think has been running the country all this time. Thankfully, the former Prime Minister's on hand again to help. It turns out it's all the fault of the media, the corporate world and, bizarrely, the President of the United States. Winston Churchill once said, "The price of greatness is responsibility." Now, I don't think the British public are expecting greatness from this Prime Minister, just a bit of accountability. So doesn't think it would be great if, just for once, the Tories actually took some responsibility.
Mr. Speaker, he talks about leadership, he talks about change, but when I learnt of something that I didn't agree with, I suspended one of my MPs straight away. But Mr. Speaker, when he learned of vile anti-Semitic remarks made by a Labour candidate, what did he do, Mr. Speaker? He instructed his team to defend him. He sent a shadow cabinet minister to campaign for him, and he personally backed him for days. And that's the difference between us. I act on my principles. He hasn't got any.
I can't believe he's saying it with a straight face. The former Prime Minister continued on her American odyssey. This journey into the wild west of her mind. She also claimed, Mr. Speaker, that Nigel Farage is the man to restore the Tory party. Can the Prime Minister confirm whether he too would welcome Mr. Farage back into the Tory fold?
Mr. Speaker, in our party, we have a proud tradition of diversity and accepting everyone from every background. Indeed, it is a proud record that puts Labour to shame, Mr. Speaker. This is the party that delivered the first Jewish Prime Minister, the first female Prime Minister, the first black Chancellor, the first Muslim Home Secretary, and now led by the first British Asian Prime Minister. While it seems he can only champion men from North London, it's the Conservatives that represent modern Britain, Mr. Speaker.
So this diverse Tory party does welcome Nigel Farage. The Prime Minister 2 months ago, the Prime Minister said the Tory party is a broad church. I welcome lots of people who want to subscribe to our ideals and our values. This is the same Nigel Farage who said he agreed with the basic premise of Enoch Powell's Rivers of Blood speech and bemoaned the influence of the Jewish lobby. So is the Prime Minister simply too scared to stand up to the gaggle of Tory MPs who moonlight as GB presenters, or does he genuinely think Nigel Farage shares the ideals and values of the Tory party?
Mr. Speaker, he wants to talk about values, but tomorrow in Rochdale, the people will have a choice of 3 former Labour candidates, 2 of which are anti-Semites, Mr. Speaker. The truth is, his party is so mired in hate that despite 3 ex-Labour candidates standing, he can't back a single one of them, Mr. Speaker. It's because we expel anti-Semites, he makes them Labour candidates.
Mr. Speaker, the truth is these are no longer the Tories your parents voted for, and the public can see it. The Prime Minister has lost control of his party to the hordes of records of malcontents, the tinfoil hat brigade over there, the extremists who wreck the economy, all lining up to undermine him, humiliate him, and eventually to get rid of him. When will he ever stand up to them and end the pathetic spectacle of a Tory party that used to try and beat Nigel Farage, now giving up and dancing to his tune instead.
Mr. Speaker, utterly shameless from someone who stood by while anti-Semitism ran rife in his party, oversaw the appalling situation in Rochdale and twice backed the member for Islington North. And in the last few homes, Mr. Speaker, last few weeks, we've seen members of Parliament's homes surrounded, their events disrupted, council meetings threatened, and just last week we saw the very rules that govern this place abused because of intimidation, Mr. Speaker. While he might, Mr. Speaker, while he might want to bend to mob rule, we will face down the extremists and stand up for British values.
Mr. Speaker, 2 years ago, last Saturday, Russian forces launched their heinous attack on Ukraine. The response of the British government and the British people has been magnificent, and I want to pay my own tribute to all those who have done so much, not least in my own constituency of Bracknell, where Ukrainian people have been so warmly welcomed. Mr. Speaker, we must never bow to tyranny. So could the Prime Minister please assure the House that our support to Ukraine and all of our NATO allies will continue to be unwavering?
Prime Minister.
Well, can I join my honourable friend in thanking people up and down the country, including the people of Bracknell, for welcoming Ukrainian families into their homes and communities. During my visit to Ukraine in January, I announced a major new package of support, including £2.5 billion of military assistance. And last week, we announced 50 new sanctions targeting individuals and businesses sustaining Putin's illegal war machine. Our support to Ukraine will never waver.
SNP leader Stephen Flynn.
Mr. Speaker, 30,000 people dead, 70,000 injured, 1.5 million sheltering in Rafah, 300,000 living in what is considered to be feral conditions in northern Gaza, and of course 100 hostages still tragically held by Hamas. It is the horror of those numbers that demands that this House have its say, just as it is the horror of those numbers that show that this House should demand an immediate ceasefire. Now, President Biden has indicated that that ceasefire may take place from Monday. Does the Prime Minister share in his confidence?
Prime Minister.
Well, Mr. Speaker, we have consistently called for an immediate humanitarian pause which would allow for the safe release of hostages, including British nationals, and more aid to reach Gaza. We welcome progress on a deal. As the honourable gentleman said, there has been progress, and we urge everyone on all sides to seize the opportunity. And I've been clear that we must seize the momentum from this terrible tragedy to find a lasting resolution to this conflict, which delivers on the promise of a two-state solution and ensures that Israelis and Palestinians can live in dignity and security.
Stephen Flynn.
Mr. Speaker, we're now approaching 5 months since this conflict first began. And in that time, this House has equivocated, and this government on 3 occasions at the United Nations has abstained when it could have voted for a ceasefire. Abstentionism is not leadership. So can I ask the Prime Minister, should this matter now come before the United Nations, with a ceasefire potentially in sight, will he use his government's vote in order to deliver that ceasefire?
Prime Minister.
Well, Mr. Speaker, we support the United States draft resolution that was discussed with colleagues at United Nations last week, but just calling for an immediate full ceasefire now, which collapses back into fighting within days or weeks, and indeed does not release hostages, including British hostages, is not in anyone's interest. We must work towards a permanent ceasefire, and that starts with an immediate humanitarian pause to get aid in and hostages out. I agree with the honourable gentleman about the suffering of the people in Gaza, and in this country we should be proud of everything we are doing to help them and provide them the life-saving aid that they deserve.
Dr. Jamie Wallace.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'm sure we're all proud of the open government we have, the availability of information and our open data. But with machine learning and AI fast becoming more prevalent, does the Prime Minister not agree that now is the time for us to look at licensing this information where it's going to be used for commercial gain to inform intelligence that's going to disrupt society and our economy? Thank you.
Prime Minister.
Well, can I join with my honourable friend and his passion for AI? And like him, I'm proud of our record at the forefront of the AI revolution, having created one of the world's first AI safety institutes, establishing the State of AI report, and hosting the world's first ever Global AI Safety Summit. Now, I will ensure that my honourable friend meets with the relevant minister to discuss his proposals to ensure that we can harness the opportunities of AI and protect ourselves against the risk that it poses.
Liz Saville-Roberts.
Plaid Cymru has signed the full facts pledge for an honest general election campaign. One of full facts' 4 asks is to renounce deceptive campaigning tactics. There is evidence of egregious, misleading campaigning in Wales and elsewhere by the Conservatives in recent weeks. We all have a responsibility to campaign honestly, because the alternative is to be complicit in dismantling democracy. Therefore, will the Prime Minister sign full facts pledge for an honest election?
Well, Mr. Speaker, I was pleased to just be in Wales last week, and these are the facts on the ground. The Labour-run Welsh NHS is performing the worst in the United Kingdom. Small Welsh businesses, including pubs and restaurants, are facing a crippling rise in their business rates. And indeed, Welsh farmers are being decimated by the plans of the Welsh Labour government. Those are the facts in Wales, and we're going to continue to point them out at every opportunity.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. There are 4,000 patients in Carshalton and Wallington facing uncertainty after landlords pulled out of discussions the day before the GP practice's lease expired and then issued them notice that they were trespassing. Now, the local ICB has issued a very weak statement. The local Lib Dem run council is refusing to meet the practice and myself. And now we have 4,000 patients unsure if they're going to have a surgery to go to. So can the Prime Minister assure me that when these decisions are taken by landlords, that there is appropriate infrastructure in place to support NHS patients before they are cast out to try and find somewhere else to go?
Prime Minister.
Well, Mr. Speaker, as my honourable friend will know, GP leases are commercial agreements between landlords and tenants, but he's right. Everything that can be done should be done to ensure that GP surgeries do not have to close. That's why in March last year we commissioned a review into legislation governing these leases, and the review will create a new framework that will make leasing to tenants such as GP surgeries and other groups easier and more accessible. But I know his local residents will want this sorted as soon as possible to take advantage of the extra appointments that we are creating so that people can get access to the primary care that they need.
Alan Smith.
Mr. Speaker, one of the few good things to come out of Wednesday's Stramash last week was that the House united around a call for an immediate ceasefire. Now, I welcome that. That's progress. The Prime Minister was just given an opportunity by my friend to commit the UK's representatives in the United Nations and elsewhere to articulate that position of this House. If they're not going to do that, what would he say to those of us who say this place really is just a sick pantomime?
Mr. Speaker, as I outlined previously, it is not right to call for an immediate ceasefire that would collapse instantly into more fighting and not do anything to get more aid into Gaza to alleviate the suffering that people are experiencing, but also to make sure that we can safely remove hostages, including British hostages. That has been our consistent position. We have been calling for an immediate humanitarian ceasefire, which will provide the conditions for a lasting and sustainable peace. But just calling for something that will collapse back into fighting is not in anyone's interest. But all our diplomatic efforts at the United Nations and elsewhere are targeted towards bringing that about, and I'm pleased that in recent days progress has been made, and we should keep pressure on all parties to come to a resolution.
Lib Dem.
Does my right honourable friend share my enthusiasm at Monday's announcement of 27 new potential bathing water sites across the country, including 3 in Shropshire, 2 on the River Severn in Ironbridge and Shrewsbury, and 1 on the River Team at Ludlow? How will these very welcome designations improve the quality of rivers in Shropshire and the other areas under consideration?
Prime Minister. Well, Mr. Speaker, on Monday we launched a consultation on the largest ever rollout of new bathing water sites. 27 potential new bathing waters in England, including an extra one on the River Team in Ludlow in my right honourable friend's constituency. And he's right, substantial improvements have been made in recent years. Almost 90% of designated bathing waters in England now meet the highest standards of good or excellent, up from just 76% in 2010, Mr. Speaker. All part of our plan for water, which alongside this side of the House, voting for the strictest storm overflow targets and plans for unlimited penalties for polluting water companies, opposed by the party opposite.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The parent of a 2-year-old in the UK is currently spending over £14,000 a year on a full-time nursery place. Last year, the Prime Minister promised these parents that in April 2024 there would be a new free childcare offer. With only a month to go, parents don't know if they can access this offer because of staff shortages and because of the lack of childcare spaces. So could I ask the Prime Minister today, will the parents that he promised, will they be able to accept this childcare offer that he talked about last year, or is this another example of a broken Tory promise?
Mr. Speaker, we're delivering on what we said, which is 30 hours of free childcare a week for parents of working parents of children from 9 months until they start school. It is the largest ever expansion of childcare in our country's history. But what I'd say to the honourable lady is, perhaps she might want to have a conversation with her Welsh Labour colleagues, who have been given the funding to deliver childcare expansion in Wales, and what have they done? They've pocketed the money instead of matching our plans to support parents in England.
Thank you very much indeed, Mr. Speaker. The notorious Uli Treaton Crossroads, just outside of Alton in my constituency, is just one of several major road safety and highway issues that have been ignored for decades by the Labour-controlled Rotherham Council. I will be presenting a petition to this place telling Rotherham Council to end this chaotic mismanagement. But can I ask the Prime Minister's support to urge both the Labour-controlled Council and the Labour Mayor to listen to residents, get this junction sorted, to stop the huge tailbacks, save lives, get Rother Valley moving, and end this war against cars in my constituency?
Well, my honourable friend raises an important point, and he's right to champion his constituents in this way, because when Labour run things, they do just run them badly. And he can be assured that we have provided £750,000 of funding to Rotherham Council for safety improvements to local roads, and we're continuing to provide vulnerable friends' constituents with a further £1 billion allocated to his local area in the second round of the City Region Sustainable Transport Settlements. Because of the decision that we made on HS2, communities, towns and cities across the North and Midlands are going to receive billions of pounds of funding for transport projects that will make a difference to him and his constituents far quicker than anything else that was planned.
Dame Diana Johnson.
Another 80 victims of the contaminated blood scandal have died since Sir Brian Langstaff gave his final recommendations on compensation to the government in April 2023, 329 days ago. Will the Prime Minister join families who are lobbying members of Parliament here today to explain why his government has failed to implement any of those recommendations 11 months on?
Mr. Speaker, I'm acutely aware of the strength of feeling on this issue and the suffering of all of those impacted by this dreadful scandal. We've consistently acknowledged that justice should be delivered. I gave evidence to the public inquiry last year. The government has accepted the moral case for compensation, and which is why on Monday in the other place we committed to bringing forward amendments at report stage of the Victim and Prisoners Bill with the intention of speeding up the implementation of our response to the infected blood inquiry.
Neil Kaczynski.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'd like to thank the Prime Minister sincerely for the extra £244 million announced this week for transport and investment in Shropshire. This comes on top of £300 million for modernisation of our local A&E services, levelling up funds to modernise Shrewsbury Town Centre, and fully funding the North West Relief Road, the Ring Road round Shrewsbury. These infrastructure projects will have a major benefit not just for us, but for those who follow us in Shropshire. There is, however, one issue I would like to still raise with the Prime Minister, which is how our local Shropshire Council is funded to deal with adult social care costs. We have a disproportionately ageing population in Shropshire, and Shropshire Council is struggling to meet those additional costs. What more can be done to help councils like Shropshire deal with rising adult social care costs?
Well, Mr. Speaker, can I pay tribute to my honourable friend for the work he does representing his constituents? He's right about the pressures that are faced, particularly in rural areas, which is why the government provided £600 million of additional funding for local government across the country, ensuring around a 7.5% increase in resources available to invest in social care, but also by an extra addition to the Rural Services Delivery Grant, an acknowledgement of the challenges of providing services in rural areas, with more funding for those rural councils to deliver.
Alison Thewlis.
My constituent Lee Haywood in Dalmarnock is on a communal heat network and has seen both his standing charges and his energy bills absolutely soar. The Heat Network Market Framework was introduced in 2021, but in a letter from his Minister in the Lords last week, he says his ambition is that price regulation will only start in spring 2026. So can I ask, is it his government's incompetence or Ofgem's lack of powers that are letting down constituents who can't afford to put on their heating this winter?
Mr. Speaker, as the honourable lady will know, standing charges are a matter for the independent regulator Ofgem, who are currently looking at all of those things as part of a consultation. And more generally, it's this government that's providing considerable support to families across the country, including in Scotland, with their energy bills. And I'm sure she will join me in welcoming the recent announcement about the fall in energy bills, bringing them back to levels that we haven't seen in a long time, on top of the cost of living support that the Chancellor's provided, so that everyone in our country gets the help that they need.
Paul Bristow.
Warrington Fields is a much-loved open space, cherished by local residents and used by the nearby school as playing fields. Shockingly, Peterborough City Council proposed to fence off almost the entire area, rejecting a compromise that most residents and the school were happy with. Bizarrely, that the local council seeks to blame the Secretary of State for Education, myself, and even the Prime Minister. Will my right honourable friend get behind my campaign to save Warrington Fields and make it clear right here, right now, that this is a matter entirely for the local authority?
Can I pay tribute to my honourable friend for his championing of his constituents on this matter? As he knows, last year the Education Secretary rightly rejected Peterborough City Council's application to remove the playing field land at Ken Stimpson Community School from educational land to public open space, and that decision ensured that children will have access to the open space that they deserve. But I am told by the department that the council can provide for some of that land to be fenced, and the department would be comfortable with that, provided that the overall site remains an educational land. That is something that I know he wants to see, and the department are ready to work with him to make sure that that happens.
Kevin Jones.
After yesterday's revelation that Nick Reed, the CEO of the Post Office, is under investigation for an 80-page report written by the former head of HR at the Post Office, does the Prime Minister and Business Secretary have confidence in Nick Reed's leadership at the Post Office?
Mr. Speaker, it would clearly be inappropriate for me to comment on an investigation before it has been completed. Our focus remains working closely with the Post Office to ensure that it delivers justice for postmasters caught up in this historic scandal, and that's why we will imminently bring forward the legislation that we promised.
Shalish Farah.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. A few years ago, there was a proposal to build nearly 7,000 houses in a beautiful part of my constituency near the villages of Castor and Aylesworth, against the wishes of the local residents. I worked with the local community, and together we were able to stop this development. However, efforts are now being made to include this land in a revised Peterborough local plan. Would the Prime Minister agree with me that it is very important that the voice of the local community is heard, and that it is unacceptable that developments can take place in this circuitous way, especially when there is other more suitable land available in and around the city of Peterborough?
My right honourable friend raises an important issue, and he's right that the local community should always have their voice heard. It's important that councils bring forward local plans, but this must be done in close consultation with local communities because their voices matter. As I understand it, the Peterborough local plan is still under preparation and there are opportunities to provide comments on the draft plan. So I encourage and commend my honourable friend for continuing to support his local community to make sure that their voice is heard.
Sarah Owen.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The Prime Minister talks about things going backwards. The UK is the only Western G7 power in recession. 7 consecutive quarters of no growth. That is the worst since records began in 1955. So can the Prime Minister tell the businesses going bust, tell the families struggling to pay their bills, and tell those being made homeless why this recession, which has his name written all over it, is a good thing for our country?
Mr. Speaker, I would say to the honourable lady she might want to check some of the facts that she just outlined for the House that aren't quite right. Perhaps she would like to explain to the country why it is that her party is stuck with a completely incoherent energy policy that will saddle working families with £28 billion of higher tax rises and higher energy bills.
Jonathan Gullis.
Mr. Speaker, since 2019, the Prime Minister has had our backs in Stoke-on-Trent North, Kidsgrove and Tork, with record in funding for our local transport. Over £200 million for Stoke and Staffordshire to repair potholes. Over £30 million to improve our bus network with cheaper fares and new and extended routes. Funding to upgrade both Kidsgrove and Stoke-on-Trent railway stations. Bringing back the Stoke to Leek line. And this week, we've seen Stoke-on-Trent and Staffordshire see a 10-fold increase in transport funding year in, year out. I know the party opposite like to talk down Stoke-on-Trent North Kidsgrove and Talk, but isn't it true that this Prime Minister, this Conservative Party, are the only party with a plan to improve our, better connect our communities and fix our broken roads and pavements?
Well, as ever, my honourable friend is a fantastic champion for Stoke-on-Trent and Kidsgrove, and he's right. Over the next several years, his area will receive 10 times as much as they currently do to invest in local transport schemes as a result of this government's decision on HS2. But he's also right. After years of being neglected by the party opposite, it's this Conservative government that is levelling up across the country and in Stoke-on-Trent, championed by fantastic MPs like him.
Jamie Stone.
Mr. Speaker, the advent of the Cromarty Firth Green Freeport is most welcome. Mr. Speaker, I wonder what discussions the Prime Minister has had with the Scottish Government, who will be responsible for ensuring that there's a robust roads network associated with the Freeport and that there will be sufficient housing for the influx of workers who we hope will contribute to our dream of the fabrication of offshore renewable structures.
I welcome the honourable gentleman's support for the Freeport, taking advantage of our Brexit opportunities to deliver 2 Freeports in Scotland, which will attract jobs and investment in the industries of the future. With regards to infrastructure investment, not only do we provide the tax benefits for a Freeport, there are £25 million of seed funding available to the Freeport in discussions with the government that can be used on local infrastructure improvements that make sense to develop the opportunities that the Freeport provides.
Simon Fell.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. The AUKUS programme is not just a national endeavour designed to keep our nation safe, but also an international partnership that speaks about our ambitious work across the globe to pursue security and contain threats. So can I personally thank the Prime Minister for his engagement with the Team Barrow initiative, bringing together senior civil servants, my council, BAE and myself, to drive this programme forward, making sure we can deliver these boats to time and to budget. That means improving the local area considerably and investing in it too. With that in mind, could I invite the Prime Minister to Barrow to meet not just the fantastic people building the boats of the future, but also to see how this programme is going to uplift Furness for the future?
Prime Minister.
At a time of great instability around the world with the war in Ukraine and the Red Sea, my honourable friend is absolutely right that AUKUS is a game-changing defence and security partnership that will keep us safe and create thousands of jobs, both in the UK, shipyards and supply chain, building on the investment in places like Barrow, Derby and elsewhere. He's a fantastic champion of what this industry means in his area, and the Team Barrow partnership is a crucial component of ensuring AUKUS is a success. That's why the Chancellor provided millions of pounds of funding for a delivery board for Barrow. We recently discussed this at Cabinet, and I look forward to visiting him and his community when my diary allows to see the progress for myself.
Anna McMorgan.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. This last weekend, the Prime Minister posed for photographs with a group that shares extremist conspiracy theories on climate change and campaigns against net zero. Does the Prime Minister share their views?
That's no way to talk about the Welsh farming community, Mr. Speaker.
My integrated care board tell me that only £2 million of the £120 million of capital which they receive annually is for primary care, and that seems an unfairly small amount for our amazing family doctors and practice nurses who are, after all, the front door of the NHS. So can our local GPs have a greater share of this?
Prime Minister.
Can I thank my honourable friend for his excellent and continued campaigning on health provisions for his constituents. Now, on the specific point that he raises, integrated care boards do have the power to increase their primary care annual capital management budgets as long as they keep within the overall budget. I understand my honourable friend recently met with the Health Minister earlier this week to discuss this further, and I will make sure that his proposals are very carefully considered.
Dame Angela Riedel.
Very much, Mr. Speaker. The Prime Minister has just told my right honourable friend, the member for North Durham, that it's inappropriate for him to be commenting as a government minister on what bullying allegations at the post office, and yet he allows his trade secretary to comment freely, loudly, and often on Twitter. Is he content with her activities and her behaviour in this respect?
Mr. Speaker, the business secretary set out her position explicitly and clearly in the House last week. And actually, since then, and despite some of the claims that were made by the party opposite, the former and permanent secretary at the department has completely refuted the claims that were made. And yesterday, the current CEO of the Post Office and the Director of Business Resilience at the department also refuted Mr. Staunton's recollection. Our focus and priority is delivering justice and compensation for those who have suffered a historic injustice. We are introducing legislation to right this wrong, and we will make sure that everyone gets the compensation that they deserve.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. The £132 million allocated to Cornwall from the Shared Prosperity Fund not only kept our promise to the Cornish people to replace EU funding, but has supported dozens of businesses and funded projects across the Duchy. However, the current round of SPF expires next year, so can the Prime Minister confirm that his government will continue with shared prosperity funding and continue to provide the support the Cornish economy needs?
Prime Minister.
It was great to visit my honourable friend the other week in his constituency and see the delights of Cornwall, and I wish everyone a happy St Piran's Day for next week, Mr. Speaker. Now, Cornwall has been awarded over £130 million to deliver, I think, 100 different projects across the county through the UK Shared Prosperity Fund. Funding is confirmed for this spending review period up to the end of March 2025. But as with all government funding, decisions regarding the future of the fund are a matter for the next spending review. But I can assure him that we remain committed to an ambitious levelling up agenda in Cornwall and across the country.
That completes Prime Minister's questions. We now come to the urgent question. Miriam Fellows.
Thank you. Mr Speaker, to ask the Secretary of State for Business and Trade if she will make a statement on what steps are being taken to restore public confidence in the Post Office Board